The call came in just after 6 p.m. on a breezy April evening in Texas. A neighbor had smelled something foul, something unnatural, drifting from the McKinley estate, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion nestled behind iron gates just outside Dallas. At first, she thought it might have been a dead animal beneath the porch, but the stench had only grown stronger, overwhelming, rotting. Two uniformed officers responded to the welfare check. The home, valued at nearly $7 million, looked quiet, pristine. A luxury vehicle parked in the circular driveway, sprinklers ticking in the background. Not the kind of place where you expect something horrible to have happened. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air hit them like a wall. Warm, thick, metallic. The kind of smell that clings to your skin. They called out. No answer. They moved through the foyer, past granite columns and designer chandeliers, their boots leaving faint prints on the glossy marble floors. Then one of them noticed a smear near the baseboard. It wasn't until they reached the wine cellar that they saw the first real sign of violence. Blood. A pool of it. Already drying. It soaked into the seams between the stone floor tiles, trailing toward a locked storage freezer. The handle was cold. The key was missing. They forced it open. What they found inside didn't look like a body at first. It looked like meat. Sections. Disconnected. Packed in black garbage bags, sealed with duct tape, buried under frozen vegetables and outdated steaks. The woman was identified by her wedding ring. Detective Mariana Cruz McKinley, a beloved veteran of the Dallas Police Department, a relentless investigator, a hero to some, a threat to others, and the wife of Texas real estate kingpin Preston McKinley. Within the hour, the house was swarming with investigators. Crime scene tape sealed the perimeter. The media hadn't arrived yet, but word was spreading fast. One of the city's most powerful men had just become the prime suspect in the murder of his wife. What nobody knew then, not the officers, not the reporters, not even the detectives on scene, was that Mariana had uncovered something. A secret her husband had buried for years. A secret she died trying to bring to light. And in the weeks that followed, the truth would unravel in ways no one saw coming. Preston James McKinley wasn't born into wealth. He built it. He grew up in El Paso, the only child of a bankrupt contractor and a mother who sold life insurance from a folding table outside a laundromat. His father drank. His mother prayed. Neither expected much from him. But Preston was different. He had something in his eyes. A hunger. At 17, he left home with a suitcase full of thrift store suits and a plan to make something of himself. By 25, he'd flipped his first dozen houses in Houston. Crumbling properties in forgotten neighborhoods that he transformed into slick, sellable dreams. People said he could sell water in a flood. He didn't just buy homes. He built empires. By 30, he was a millionaire. By 35, his name was plastered across billboards and business magazines. The Golden King of Dallas, they called him. The man who made fortunes rise out of dirt. He was charming, generous. He donated to children's hospitals, threw fundraisers for veterans, cut ribbons at city projects. Every politician in Dallas wanted a photo op with Preston McKinley. But behind all that gold and charm was a man who learned early that power was built on control. And nothing could be allowed to threaten what he built. Not even the woman he loved. Mariana Elena Cruz didn't grow up dreaming of luxury mansions or political galas. She dreamed of justice. Born and raised in Oak Cliff, a gritty neighborhood in South Dallas, Mariana learned early that the system didn't protect everyone equally. Her father, a truck driver, was shot and killed during a robbery when she was 10. The case went cold within weeks. Her mother, a housekeeper, raised Mariana and her two younger brothers on a single income, scraping by on faith, discipline, and the unshakable belief that you never let life break you. Mariana carried that belief into adulthood. She joined the Dallas Police Department at 21. By 30, she'd already made detective. She wasn't flashy. She didn't play politics. But she worked hard, stayed sharp, and solved cases others couldn't. Child trafficking, gang violence, political corruption. She never backed down, even when it cost her promotions or made enemies in high places. That was part of what made her so good. It was also what caught the eye of Preston McKinley. They met at a charity auction. Mariana was attending as security detail for a city councilman. Preston was the guest of honor, charming, golden-skinned, and magnetic. Their connection was instant. Two worlds collided that night, law and luxury, grit and glamour. Friends warned her he was too polished, too perfect. But Preston was kind, attentive, and oddly humble behind closed doors. He listened when she talked. He asked questions about her cases, her past, her dreams. He made her laugh. And in time, he made her fall in love. They married 2 years later. A detective and a mogul. The city watched them like royalty. Power couple. Unstoppable. Beautiful. But only Mariana knew what the inside of that life truly looked like. Only she saw the cracks beginning to show. Publicly, Preston and Mariana were a model couple. They were photographed at charity balls, city development launches, ribbon cuttings. They smiled for the cameras, held hands like teenagers, and made headlines for their philanthropy. But behind the smiles, something had shifted. At first, it was small. Preston became withdrawn. He spent long hours locked in his home office. He canceled dinners, stopped joining her at police functions. He was always on the phone, always traveling, always distracted. Then came the silence. He stopped asking about her work. He avoided her eyes when she brought up family, children, the future. His touch faded. His tone hardened. Mariana knew what distance looked like. She'd seen it in hundreds of relationships over the years. But this wasn't just emotional fatigue. It was something else. Something colder. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the vaulted ceiling of their mansion, wondering if the man she married had ever truly existed. And then came the moment that changed everything. It started with a file. Mariana wasn't looking for anything suspicious. She was working a case involving a shell company suspected of laundering cartel money through luxury properties in Texas. One of the company's listed addresses, a seemingly random office in Arlington, traced back to a private real estate trust. That trust was owned by a holding firm, and that holding firm was linked to Preston McKinley. At first, she told herself it was a coincidence. Preston had hundreds of investments. He didn't manage them all personally. But as she dug deeper, her stomach sank. The addresses, the names, the off-the-books accounts. It was all tied to him. Mariana didn't say anything at first. She wanted to be sure. She pulled records at night when he was asleep. She traced wire transfers. She cross-referenced shell companies with properties Preston had built in West Dallas. Luxury condos that had been mostly vacant since their completion. But they weren't vacant. Not really. They were being used as safe houses. For who? She didn't know yet. But the money trail was clear. Preston McKinley was laundering millions through empty buildings, all under the guise of private real estate ventures. And some of the funds were connected to names she recognized from federal watch lists. It was bigger than she imagined. And it wasn't just about money. It was about people and death. Mariana spent 3 weeks tracing the money. Every name, every transfer, every deed hidden behind shadow companies led to one conclusion. Preston wasn't just laundering money. He was laundering lives. The luxury condos he'd built in the west side of Dallas weren't just shell properties for tax evasion. They were transit points. Mariana discovered quiet surveillance footage not even meant to be kept. Snippets of men being escorted in at night, women with bruises and vacant eyes, children whose faces had been blurred in files she wasn't meant to see. Human trafficking. That was the secret. Preston McKinley, the man who built playgrounds in poor neighborhoods, who cut ribbons for women's shelters, who shook the hands of governors and police chiefs, was funneling trafficked victims through the very buildings he'd been praised for developing. He wasn't the front man. He was the architect, the hidden infrastructure behind a brutal operation that stretched beyond Texas. Mariana traced files linking him to buyers and sellers across the border, into Mexico, and as far as the Middle East. Her blood ran cold. She couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. She stared at her husband during breakfast, watching him sip coffee, his face calm, unaware. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe he knew exactly what she'd found. Maybe he was already watching her watching him. Mariana went to internal affairs. Quietly, carefully, she presented partial findings to an old friend, someone she trusted. Told him to keep it off the record for now. Said she'd have more within a week. And she would have, if she'd lived that long. She confronted him the night of April 2nd. She waited until late, until the house was quiet, until she was sure they were alone. Preston had just poured himself a scotch, the same brand he always drank when he wanted to feel untouchable. She stepped into his office and closed the door behind her. "I know," she said. He didn't answer at first. He just looked at her. "I know about the properties, the shell companies, the people." Still silence. And then he laughed. A low, humorless laugh, like something inside him had cracked open. He took a sip, walked to the window, and said, "You weren't supposed to find that." Mariana stepped forward. "I already turned in part of the file. If something happens to me, it won't matter. The investigation's in motion." Preston turned to her then, slowly, and his face changed. Gone was the charming real estate king, the philanthropist, the husband. What she saw in his eyes wasn't rage. It wasn't panic. It was cold calculation. "You think you're smarter than me," he said. "You think the system will protect you. But you don't understand what I built." "I don't lose, Mariana." "You already have," she replied. It was the last thing she ever said. No one knows exactly how he did it. There were no signs of forced entry, no screaming, no struggle reported by neighbors. The security system, controlled by Preston's private server, showed no alerts. Forensic evidence later pieced together fragments. Blood in the guest bathroom, scratches on the marble counter, a broken fingernail embedded in the grout. Whatever happened, it happened quickly. She may have tried to fight. She likely did. But Preston was taller, heavier, and unhinged. He struck her, hard enough to knock her unconscious. Maybe killed her instantly. Or maybe not. What followed was something far darker than murder. He dismembered her body, methodically, with tools from the garage. The autopsy later revealed precision, a knowledge of anatomy, the kind of detachment you don't develop overnight. He wrapped her in trash bags, labeled them with duct tape, cleaned the floors with industrial-grade bleach, scrubbed the drains, burned the clothes she'd worn. He stuffed her body into the basement freezer, beneath outdated groceries and party trays from a gala they never attended. And then he went to sleep. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he sat up all night, sipping that same scotch, staring into the quiet, wondering if the empire he built would be enough to protect him. Preston had always believed that power meant control. Control of the narrative, control of the outcome, control of the people. So when he killed Mariana, he didn't panic. He planned. He woke early the next morning and made his first call, not to the police, not to friends or family, but to his attorney, a man named Damon Kell. Damon had represented developers accused of everything from bribery to environmental destruction. He didn't ask questions. He was the kind of lawyer who made things disappear. Preston told him Mariana had left after a fight. Said she was emotional, unstable. Claimed she'd been investigating something dangerous, something that made her paranoid. Told him she'd probably gone underground for her own safety. Damon, ever the fixer, nodded. "We'll get ahead of this," he said. Within hours, a vague public statement was released from Preston's office. It read, "Mariana Cruz McKinley has taken an indefinite leave of absence from the Dallas Police Department for personal reasons. The McKinley family asks for privacy and understanding during this time." He didn't file a missing persons report. He didn't notify her family. He simply erased her. But Preston made one mistake, a mistake he never anticipated. He underestimated her. Because Mariana had left behind more than evidence. She'd left behind questions. Detective Elijah Moreno was the first to notice something wasn't right. He'd worked alongside Mariana for nearly a decade. She was sharp, punctual, disciplined to a fault. She didn't just vanish. And she definitely didn't abandon a case mid-investigation. When she didn't show up to a meeting with internal affairs, Elijah grew suspicious. He called her. No answer. Texted. Nothing. He drove by the house but never got out of his car. Something about it, the silence, the stillness, didn't sit right. He went back to the station and pulled her latest files. Most were sealed, but one had a name he recognized, Ardell Holdings, a fake real estate development company that had come up 2 years earlier in a trafficking case. The charges were dropped. Evidence vanished. Witnesses went silent. Elijah started asking questions. Within 48 hours, Preston McKinley's perfectly curated story began to fall apart. The police returned to the house, this time with a search warrant. They found traces of blood under the tiles, hair samples in the shower drain, and in the basement freezer, beneath frozen steaks and vacuum-sealed wine coolers, they found her, or what was left of her. News broke like wildfire. Real estate mogul linked to wife's disappearance. Detective found dismembered in husband's freezer. Texas power couple's secret life ends in blood. Preston McKinley was arrested at his office on April 5th, just 2 days after the murder. He was calm, silent, no outbursts, no panic. He didn't resist. He didn't even flinch when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't have to. Not yet. Because Preston had another card to play. Bail was denied, but his legal team filed motion after motion. They questioned the search warrant, claimed planted evidence, suggested Mariana had enemies in the criminal world who wanted her silenced. The media circus exploded. Some said Preston was innocent. Others called him a monster in a suit. Candlelight vigils were held in front of the DPD headquarters. Protesters camped outside the courthouse. Hashtags trended. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the man they once celebrated. And in the middle of it all, one question remained. How many people had he helped disappear before he was caught? The trial began 6 months after Mariana's murder. By then, the world had turned. Every local and national outlet covered the case. Courtroom sketches of Preston McKinley in a charcoal suit, thinner now, grayer around the temples, were plastered across newspapers and digital front pages. Gone was the king, the mogul. In his place sat a man cornered by the very power he thought could save him. Prosecutors called it the most calculated domestic crime in modern Texas history. They had blood evidence, DNA matches, financial trails Mariana had uncovered before her death. They had the freezer, the bags, the labels, the gloves with his fingerprints. But what they didn't have was a confession, and Preston refused to give them one. He sat silently beside his legal team, eyes fixed forward, emotionless as testimony after testimony painted him as a monster. The prosecution opened with Mariana's brother, Luis. He told the court how she'd called him just days before her death, saying she was onto something dangerous, and if anything happened to her, not to believe it was an accident. His voice broke when he said her name. The courtroom went still. Next came Elijah Moreno. He testified about the inconsistencies in Preston's story, about the files Mariana had been working on, about the moment he realized she wasn't just missing, she was dead. Then came the forensic team. They laid it out in brutal detail. The blood spatter patterns, the dismemberment, the chemical cleaning agents, the cold calculation. But Preston's team wasn't done. The defense strategy was brutal, not in its power, but in its cruelty. They painted Mariana as unstable, claimed she'd become obsessed with conspiracy theories, that she'd been depressed, erratic. They hinted at substance abuse, though there was no proof. They introduced private texts, taken from Preston's phone, showing her angry, suspicious, distant. She was spiraling, one of Preston's attorneys said. She made enemies. She pushed people away. We believe she staged her own disappearance and returned to confront Mr. McKinley in a state of delusion. It was a bold lie, and one that didn't hold up under pressure. Because the jury saw the photos. They saw the freezer, the bags, the ring on her severed hand. They saw the crime for what it was, premeditated, monstrous, personal. Still, The defense pressed on. They had to. Preston refused to take a deal. He was convinced, arrogantly, fatally, that he could win. That one more performance, one more display of power, could turn the tide. He took the stand. When Preston McKinley walked to the witness box, the room leaned in. Everyone wanted to hear what he would say, whether he would admit what he'd done, whether he would show remorse, whether the man who built skyscrapers and cut ribbons could now, finally, come clean. He didn't. He lied. He said he loved Mariana, said she'd been paranoid, said she left in the night, and he never saw her again. When asked about the freezer, he claimed someone planted the evidence. When asked why her blood was found in the bathroom and on his clothes, he paused. "I don't know," he said. "I wish I did." The prosecution leaned forward. "You dismembered your wife, Mr. McKinley. You placed her in bags. You labeled them. You cleaned your home with enough bleach to burn skin. Are you seriously asking us to believe you don't know how her blood ended up all over your house?" He didn't answer. The silence was louder than any scream. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. That in itself told the world everything. No endless debates. No hung jury. No deadlock. Just a unanimous conclusion sealed inside a simple manila envelope. The courtroom was packed on the day of the verdict. Reporters filled every seat. Mariana's family sat in the front row, faces tight with grief and exhaustion. Luis Cruz clutched the folded prog. At the jury as they filed in, he didn't look at Mariana's family. He kept his eyes on the floor. On the charge of first-degree murder, the foreman said, "We find the defendant, Preston James McKinley, guilty." No one in the courtroom moved. There was no gasp, no shout, just a long, collective exhale, as if the entire city had been holding its breath for 6 months. The judge continued. "For the charge of tampering with evidence, guilty. For the charge of abuse of a corpse, guilty." Preston's face didn't change. But something inside him, whatever mechanism once made him believe he was untouchable, snapped. You could see it. The hollowing behind his eyes. The slow understanding that no money, no name, no lawyer could undo what had been done. The judge sentenced him the following week. Life without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Dallas was never quite the same. The story haunted the city. The glamorous mansion on Oak Ridge Drive was auctioned off, sold to a private developer who tore it down. Locals said no one wanted to live on cursed ground. The McKinley brand was erased. Preston's name removed from buildings, plaques, charity walls. Investors pulled out of his developments. His accounts were seized. His empire collapsed like a house of cards. But Mariana's story didn't fade. She became a symbol, not just of justice, but of courage. The city renamed a local park in Oak Cliff after her, Detective Mariana Cruz Memorial Park. 6 months after the sentencing, Elijah Moreno received a package at his desk. No return address. Inside was a thumb drive. It contained a backup of Mariana's original investigation, the complete, unedited version, with names, numbers, timelines, even a video file, a private message she'd recorded weeks before she died. She sat at her desk, her badge visible in the corner of the frame. Her voice was calm, steady. There were no tears. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I didn't make it." She paused. "But that's okay. Because I didn't do this for me. I did this because I couldn't look away. And neither should you." She smiled, that same half-smile Elijah remembered from their early days in the force. Make it count. And he did. They all did. Because in the end, Mariana Cruz wasn't just a detective. She was the reckoning. And she didn't go quietly. If this story gripped you the way it gripped us, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more dramatic true crime retellings, both real and fictional. Mariana Cruz stood for truth, even when it cost her everything. So ask yourself, how far would you go to expose a secret? Share this video if her story moved you. Comment below with the part that hit you the hardest. And if you have a case you want us to cover next, drop it in the comments. We uncover the stories others are too afraid to tell. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and never look away.